Thank you. What's unfair about having the top basketball team? It's not unfair. I root for Clemson in football. My wife and I have this agreement that we fly a Clemson flag in front of our house during football season, we fly a Duke flag in front of our house during basketball season, and we fly an American flag all the rest of the time. It's a good way to do it. I have a confession to make. I absolutely hate public speaking. I always have. I've been called on to do it routinely. I never have gotten to the point where I enjoy it. But when Lori Rovin and Jamie Moon came to see me and asked me to speak this morning, they asked me to speak about a topic that I have deep passion for. And I immediately said yes. Now, my wife will tell you I've threatened to quit public speaking routinely, but I was overwhelmed by the opportunity to talk to you today about early childhood investment. To speak about early childhood investment, how many accountants do we have in the room? Show of hands. You're going to be disappointed. I don't have any spreadsheets. Not going to do that. What I'd like to do is take you on my own personal journey that generated this passion that I have. And I'd like to start by taking you back to June 15th, 2009. We'll make this read like a Harvard Business School case study. Dick Wilkerson, the chairman and president of Michelin North America, was sitting in his office. It was 5 o'clock in the evening. His feet were on his desk. He was looking out his window as traffic backed up on Interstate 85. It's a true story. Two emotions were flowing through me at that time. One was elation and satisfaction. The second was shock and depression. The elation and satisfaction came from the fact that Michelin North America had weathered the storm of the Great Recession. It didn't come without sacrifice. There was tremendous sacrifice. But we didn't lay off a single person, not one. Our people sacrificed by working reduced hours in our plants. We didn't lay off anybody, but when you have a 20% cut in hours, it means a 20% cut in pay, and it hurts. But people saw this as an investment and a commitment to our company. And we returned to profitability far sooner than any company around us because of their commitment. And the first thing we did with that profit happened on June 12th, the Friday before I was sitting in my office, when we distributed checks to every supervisor in the company to give individually to each employee who had sacrificed compensation equivalent to roughly 95% of what they had lost. It was the best day of my life. I mean, I'm serious. I still get choked up thinking about it. It made a difference. It made a difference for our people. So why was I shocked and depressed at the same time? Well, that Monday morning, I had met with the head of human resources in our company, and he came in and he said, we're having trouble finding people qualified to hire for our plants. Now, we're in the middle of the recession. Unemployment's high, and we can't find people to hire that meet our qualifications. Why? What do you do when you need to find an answer? You Google it, right? And I did. I went online and Googled, and here's why I was depressed. Ready, willing, and unable to serve. A major study conducted by the Defense Department of the United States that concluded that 75% of people in this country between the ages of 17 and 24 were not qualified to volunteer for the United States military. Think about that. 75%. 3 out of 4 could not volunteer. Why? 3 major reasons. Number 1, no high school diploma or equivalency. Number 2, health problems led by obesity. And number 3, a criminal record, oftentimes something as simple as marijuana use. 3 disqualifiers meant that 75% of our young people were not qualified to join the U.S. military, and this report described that as a national security crisis. All of a sudden, it became clear to me why Michelin was having trouble hiring. If the military couldn't get volunteers that were qualified, then certainly we were going to have similar difficulty. Think about it, 3 out of 4. What was their conclusion? What was their diagnosis? It's the same diagnosis we face right now when we have 71% not qualified and 73% in South Carolina. And that diagnosis is the most proven way, cost-effective, to change this outcome is early childhood investment. The most proven way, the most cost-effective way to change the outcome is early childhood investment. And as I was sitting there thinking about this, I said, I want to reflect on my own childhood. What happened to get me where I was? And I invite you to take this journey too as I talk about my childhood. Bob mentioned I was born into a military family. In fact, my father graduated from Erskine College in summer of 1941, right before Pearl Harbor. When Pearl Harbor came, even though he had a college degree, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. I asked him why he didn't go to OCS. He said, all I cared about was defending my country. 37 years later, he retired. He fought at Guadalcanal in World War II. He fought at the Chosin Basin, company commander in Korea. He commanded the 1st Marine Regiment in Vietnam. He is one of the few people left in the United States who can wear a ball cap that says World War II, Korea, Vietnam veteran. When he retired, he was the commanding general of Fleet Marine Forces Pacific. But I'm not going to talk about him today. I talk about him often. He is my hero. I'm going to talk about my mom. I went back and I thought about 3 different events in my early childhood that impacted me. The first one was a recognition that when I was young, my mother always read to me. A simple thing, reading. She also played forever on this old record player, Peter and the Wolf. Have y'all ever heard that? I mean, it had a little book that went with it, and the oboes were the hunters or whatever. All the time playing Peter and the Wolf. But it was a gift to me to prepare me, to stimulate my brain. Des Kelly, who's here, will tell you those years are critical, 0 to 5. All right? She was there for that. But during my 1st grade, she had concluded that I was, how to put it, an unenthusiastic learner. How did she reach that conclusion? Well, there were 2 reasons. One was every time I was home, I didn't do any voluntary reading. I didn't do anything except play and goof around. And when I was bored, I'd come up to her and say, what can I do? What can I do? And she'd suggest, go read. I don't want to read, Mom. What can I do? And then she would say, mildew. Don't ever say that to your kids. Don't do that. It just frustrated me no end. So she had reached a conclusion that I wasn't a voluntary reader. And then, although my academic grades were good in the 1st grade, I mean, elementary school, come on, there was one particular area that concerned her and my father. It was a C in comportment. How many of you have been a teacher or are a teacher? Show of hands. First of all, thank you. Thank you. The military protects our democracy externally. Education protects us internally. So thank you to those of you who are teachers. My parents were concerned about my comportment, and as much as I tried to tell them it was because my teachers lacked a certain sense of humor, they didn't agree to that, and so I had to conform. But after first grade, my mom had concluded that I needed an intervention, and that intervention was returning to her hometown in Pocatello, Idaho, and sending me to spend every other day with one of her elementary school teachers from when she was young. And I remember her to this day. Her name was Mrs. Clear. Mrs. Clear was a wonderful woman, although there was a little diabolical side to her. Each day she would start, and typically we'd play a board game. Usually it was Clue. And Mrs. Clear would have us play Clue. There were 4 or 5 of us there, but she wanted us to explain why Colonel Mustard did it in the study with a lead pipe. She wanted us to think and talk about what was our reasoning. That wasn't diabolical. What was diabolical is in the afternoon she would take out The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling, and she would read one chapter. Reading one chapter of The Jungle Book to children and closing it and saying, "See you Wednesday," is like waiting to 2019 for the next episode of Game of Thrones, okay? It hooked me because The Jungle Book stimulated imagination. It stimulated all sorts of thoughts, and in fact, I found that we had a copy at home, and I started reading it on my own, and it changed my life. It changed reading into an adventure. It changed my thirst for knowledge. So I read Rikki Tikki Tavi. I read Treasure Island. I read all the Tom Swift books that got me interested in engineering. It went on, and it changed my life. The third event in my childhood that impacted me occurred later. Was when the 6th and 7th grade, my father was stationed at Pearl Harbor, and my parents were deeply concerned about the school, the public school that I was assigned to. And I went to public school my entire life except for 6th and 7th grade. And in the 6th and 7th grade, my parents concluded that I needed to go to Iolani. Anybody heard of Iolani? It's a private Episcopal school for boys in downtown Honolulu. So I rode the bus every morning to Iolani, got off, and I was the only Caucasian in my class. Everyone else was Oriental, Polynesian, Pacific Islander. They all lived in Honolulu. They ate different food. They talked differently than me. The first 6 months they called me Te Kainhali Punk, which is Hawaiian for white punk, okay? And it wasn't an academic challenge. It was a small component of the challenges that Laurie talked about that children face. How do you feel when you're different and you're alone? How do you feel when you're excluded? You're omitted from what's going on. And I would come home and I'd have basically 3 emotions when I came home. One was everything went okay. One was anger that I had been omitted and slighted. And my mother would meet me and read my expression, and she'd say, "You're angry, and I know you are. Go pound on that pillow and get that negative energy out of you." And then she would come back and say, "Dick, you're strong. You came from pioneer stock in Idaho. Get 100 in everything." And I'd come home sometimes and I'd be depressed. I'd be sad that I'd been left out. And she'd say, "I know you're hurting." And then there was that theme. But remember, be strong. You came from pioneer stock. Get 100 in everything. It was her way of supporting. It's her way of saying to her children, "I love you and I'm with you." That was my journey. Those are the 3 examples in my childhood of what impacted me, the special people. Think about your own experiences. The conclusion of our people who did the study is still accurate. Experiences like mine in early childhood form who we are. After thinking about my own experience, I had two questions, and they're the same question: what if? What if my mother had not read to me when I was a child? What if, in fact, Mrs. Clear had never been a part of my life? What if my mother and my family had not been there to support me when I felt alone? And then I turned the question around and said, what if we could provide every child someone to read when they're young? What if we could provide every child an experience, even though it's a short 3-month experience that changed my life? What if we could provide everybody who's a young person a Mrs. Clear to touch their lives? What if we could teach parents to understand and support and inspire their children? And the answer to that was in the report. It was in the report of Ready, Willing, but Unable to Serve. The studies show that quality early education and early focus on development increases graduation rates at high school by as much as 44%. Child parent centers like a Child's Haven, at-risk children left out of quality early education, 70% more likely to commit violent crimes. Think about that. This is not insignificant. 70% more. In fact, here's a study done by the Perry Preschool. And in that study, they followed children for years and found out this is at-risk children. 7% who went to the Perry Preschool experience were chronic criminals. Similar children who didn't go to the Perry Preschool program, 35% chronic crime. 5 times as much as those children who went to preschool programs for at-risk children, for people who have development issues, who have financial challenges. It cut crime by 500%. What's the cost of failure? Individual children who grow up, drop out of school, abuse drugs, get into crime, cost society, all of us, $2.5 million per person. That's not chump change. That's a lot of money. Child's Haven has a special role in our community in changing that cycle. A Child's Haven focuses on the child and the parents. It's children who have special risks, developmental challenges, financial challenges in the home. Parents who want to be good parents but are not sure how. And it makes a difference, and you saw in the video we saw before Bob spoke, you saw the difference it can make in someone's life. It pays for itself. A recent RAND study showed well-designed early childhood interventions show a return to society ranging between $1.80 to $17.70 per dollar invested. I made multiple million-dollar decisions at Michelin with less compelling information than this. If we really want to reduce crime in our community, invest in early childhood development. If we want to reduce prison expenses, invest in early childhood education. If we want to reduce the cost of unemployment, invest in early childhood development. If we want to increase graduation rates in high school, invest in early childhood development. If we want people to be qualified to serve in our military, invest in early childhood development. If I want people to be employed at Michelin in high-tech jobs, invest in early childhood development. As I have gotten older, I have grown less patient and more frustrated with this topic. Sometimes people have come to me and said, I really care about these children. I have tears in my eyes about these children. Well, folks, the time for crying is passing. It's the time for trying for our children. We need to do it. When I think about myself, my challenge to myself is, what do I do? It's a huge problem. What can I do to make a difference? And I have 3 things I've set for my goals. And I encourage you to claim one of them at least for you. I can volunteer. I can serve on boards. I can read to children. You can too. Ask Lori what she needs. Ask Jamie Moon at the Institute for Child Success. Ask Megan what United Way can do for early childhood investment. There are all sorts of things we can do, so volunteer. The second thing we can do is ask our government officials, our leaders in our communities, in our state, in our federal government, do you know the return on investment for early childhood? If they don't know, get them the information. If they do know, ask them what they're doing with it. What are we doing to change where we are now? And the third thing we can do is invest and support a Child's Haven. It's getting results today right in this community. Last night, I was sitting at my desk. Fortunately, it no longer overlooks Interstate 85. And I was thinking about, what was I going to say today? And I reflected once again on my mother and Mrs. Clear and what they did in changing the trajectory of my life. And I took out my checkbook and I wrote this check to a Child's Haven. And I did something I never do. I filled out the bottom left-hand corner, the purpose of the check. Do you ever do that? On this check, it says, for Mom and Mrs. Clear. Think about the people who've impacted your life. Think about the children who are served by a Child's Haven. I ask you to honor them by joining me in supporting the work of a Child's Haven. It's a great investment. Thank you.